So we are back with yet another season of Bridgerton, and since the release of the last season, season 3, I've been waiting to see if they brought something a little more interesting to the table in terms of storyline, or more specifically in terms of the main couple. Because every season there's always one couple in particular that they focus on, with one of them being one of the members of the Bridgerton family, and along with it are the other side characters that simultaneously have their own romances going on. But season 3, even though I didn't hate it, was pretty boring and looked a little forced in my opinion, at least in comparison to the seasons before it, and it felt like the show was losing its spark a little bit. But of course, some people feel differently than I do, so it's all a matter of what type of storytelling you enjoy, I guess. But regardless, after that I started hearing word about season 4 being about Eloise, then I heard it was going to be about Benedict, and that second one was the one that ended up sticking. And shortly after that, the trailers started rolling out, and I got a better idea of what to expect, and it was shaping up to be something that could reignite my interest in the show. Now, they have released part 1 with the first 4 episodes of the season over on Netflix, with part 2 coming at the end of this month on February 26th. So let's get right into these first set of episodes, shall we? Because naturally, I had quite a few thoughts. Now, there are a few things going on. First off, we have Penelope and Colin. They're still together, but as we saw at the end of that last season, they did have a son together. So she's now married and a mom, and now she's also trying to balance that along with being pretty much a celebrity. Because back in season 3, she had exposed the fact that she's actually Lady Whistledown to both the Queen and the Ton. So that secret was now out, which I honestly wish they didn't expose, because honestly, it just kind of killed the mystique around Lady Whistledown. It just took out a major part of the show for me. So now people are just out here trying to impress or suck up to her so that she either writes something good about them or gives them information, in the Queen's case in particular, because she's now pressing her for information and even pressuring her into a bet to see if Benedict is going to be the next in line to be married. So that was one major part of the show that they definitely ruined for me, like I said already, but anywho. They did what they did. They exposed Penelope as Lady Whistledown, but now we have to get on with it. So outside of that, we have some new characters. We have the Penwood, Lady Araminta being the matriarch of the family, who's very eager to have her 2 daughters, Rosamund and Posey Lee, marry well during their coming out season as debutantes on the marriage market. But she also simultaneously wants those marriages to boost her standing amongst the London elitist society in the process. Now, Rosamund immediately comes across as being very similar to her mother, very ambitious and very determined to rise through the ranks of the aristocracy. But on the other hand, there's Posey, who actually wants to form a connection with whoever she marries and wants to be in love. Then we have Sophie, who comes into the story during the Bridgerton's masquerade ball at the beginning, all dressed up and in disguise, and she comes across Benedict, who then asks her to dance, and they have a little chit chat alone, which kind of reminds me of season 1 with Daphne and Simon. But basically this turns into our classic Cinderella story. So after Sophie realizes the time, she gives Benedict a kiss, then she accidentally leaves behind one of her gloves instead of the shoe, the classic shoe that Cinderella leaves behind, and she basically bolts up out of there back to the Penwood house because she's actually their maid. So now Benedict, much like Prince Charming in the Cinderella story, he's making it his mission to find this mystery woman because she left before they all took off their masks to reveal themselves at the ball. Now, one other storyline I want to mention is what's going on with Lady Agatha and Queen Charlotte. Now, in the show's spin-off Queen Charlotte, we get to see a little bit of Agatha and Charlotte's story and how they became friends while Agatha was actually one of her ladies in waiting. So over the decades, they became very close, with Agatha becoming the Queen's confidant in a sense when King George's illness had begun to get a lot worse. But here in the 4th season of Bridgerton, we see that Lady Agatha really is itching to get out of the palace because she wants to travel and kind of do what she wanted, being that she was now getting up there in age. So naturally, she starts having conversations with the Queen to kind of nudge her in the direction of getting a replacement for her in her court. So at the ball here, Lady Agatha is pouring her heart out into her explanation as to why she wants to leave and no longer be the Queen's lady in waiting, and Queen Charlotte just replies with the coldest of no's. And I just couldn't help but roll on the floor laughing after this one, because this has to become a meme. Let's switch gears back to our Bridgerton Cinderella Sophie. So Sophie, like I said already, is a maid at the Penwood house, but after Benedict starts asking one too many questions and Lady Araminta finds scuff marks on the shoes that Sophie had taken to wear to the ball, she puts it all together and finds out that Sophie had gone to the ball. But it turns out that Sophie is not just their maid, but actually the illegitimate daughter of Lady Araminta's late husband, the Earl of Penwood. And just like the evil stepmother that she is, she forces Sophie to perform the duties of 4 maids to apparently keep her out of trouble, according to Lady Araminta, after the Earl had passed away. So after years of this woman's BS, Sophie decides to stand up to her and gets kicked out of the house, but finds herself working somewhere else outside of Mayfair, where Benedict runs into her because of one of the owners trying to cause trouble. So Benedict defends her honor, so to speak, and gets her fired in the process. So he decides to offer her a place to stay at his cottage for a while, which she reluctantly accepts, while also nursing him back to health after he hurt himself in the fight with her previous boss. So eventually they start catching feelings for each other, and his cook and housekeeper start taking notice, and she even tries to warn Sophie because it could cost her work in the future with other employers. But Sophie and Benedict do share a little smooch sesh regardless, and afterwards Sophie just tries to keep it strictly business after he offers her a job working for his mother in the Bridgerton house. But we see that after Lady Araminta got rid of Sophie, she found herself in need of several new maids. So she starts trying to take other people's maids by offering a higher pay than their current employer. And news of this ends up reaching Mrs. Farley, Lady Featherington's head of staff and housekeeper. And y'all, I could not get over the scene. This is coming after Mrs. Farley told Lady Featherington about the offer for higher pay, and Lady Featherington claimed that, they couldn't afford to give her more. But then she decides to take the time to go through her closet to give Mrs. Farley some of her old dresses. I can't remember if it was before or during this scene where she was like, yeah, I'm about to spend more money on something else. I can't remember what exactly she said, but it was just like, didn't you just say you couldn't afford to give me more money? Like, what? So yeah, that was just crazy. So I knew she was leaving after that, and Mrs. Farley definitely didn't waste any time moving to work for Lady Araminta in her new house in Mayfair. But I did find out from a TikTok video, because when you're watching these things, you're bound to miss some stuff. So when Sophie got kicked out of the house, their original house, before they moved to Mayfair, Posey had given her shoe clips to sell for some money, but we find out that they're basically worthless. And it's actually because Lady Araminta isn't actually as wealthy as people think. So after the Earl of Penwood, Sophie's father, had died years before, his title and estate had been passed down to the next male relative in the family, since Lady Araminta and the Earl didn't have any male heirs. So this is the real reason why she and the girls end up moving to Mayfair, and she's pretty much desperate to marry her daughters off to rich men, much like Lady Featherington in season 2. Because the money is just not really there. What little she was getting from the will, she was spending on new dresses for Posey and Rosamond to parade around in, hoping to catch a rich husband. But it turns out she had kicked Sophie out right before the move because she was also getting money from the will for Sophie as well, just as long as she was staying in the household. So she was actually using this money to try and poach the new maids. So basically, she got that money through deception. So now that all that's explained, let's get back to the Bridgertons. So when Benedict takes Sophie to Mayfair to meet his mom, there's a lot going on. We have Francesca and Lord Stirling returning from Scotland with Eloise, which I guess was kind of boring in comparison to Mayfair. And now Hyacinth, their youngest sister, I think, is now going to be presented to society, or getting ready to be. But Eloise keeps trying to ruin the experience just because she wasn't a fan of the whole process when she did it. And I hate when people are like that. Like, let her live and be excited for what she wants to be excited for, Like, don't be the Debbie Downer here. But on the other hand, we have Violet, who's now seeing Lady Agatha's brother, Lord Marcus Anderson, and things definitely get spicy. Like, to the point where I think this now qualifies as her season. I was honestly watching these episodes like, yes, Violet, let that freak flag fly, honey. Anywho, Violet ends up liking Sophie, and so does Eloise after she finds out that Sophie likes reading the books that she likes. So she takes on a position at the house, but now keeps seeing Benedict while he's entertaining other women, trying to figure out who this mystery woman was at the ball in episode 1. But the entire time I was like, why doesn't this woman just tell him who she is? Like, what are we doing? But I get why she didn't want to say anything at first, though. I get it. You want to build up some intrigue, especially in terms of a storyline. I understand, but it was frustrating, I'm not gonna lie. But back to Francesca, though. She and Lord Sterling are struggling to conceive at the moment, and she also hasn't reached her sexual pinnacle, as Lord Sterling refers to it. And things get even more complicated when his cousin Michaela comes to visit. So you got Francesca over there looking like a deer in headlights, trying to not make it look obvious that she has a crush on her. Now, after Benedict decides to go back to his cottage under Sophie's insistence, he comes back to find her on her way back out the house. They get a little frisky, and Benedict decides to take this very moment, after doing some very deep thought on his end, I'm guessing, even though this ends up not being his finest moment, he decides to ask Sophie to be his mistress. Y'all, I almost hollered, because what? Mistress? At that moment, I was like, Benedict, is your brain situated okay in your skull? Because what? Excuse me? Sophie didn't even say anything. The look of disgust and pure disappointment on her face was enough while she walked away. And the fact that Benedict was confused by her reaction is crazy. I understand he was looking at it as him being a lord and her being a maid. It would be kind of looked down upon by the Ton. But really, my guy? It was just the nerve for me. But that's pretty much where we leave off. But that was just the wildest cliffhanger I have seen in a minute. My jaw was literally on the floor. But what do y'all think about the show so far? Is it giving what you were expecting, or is it falling flat for you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I think so far for me, episode 4 has probably been the most interesting. But yeah, I think this is shaping up to be something interesting. But y'all can let me know your thoughts. Like I said already, I'll catch y'all in the next one.